Hi, everybody. Thanks for all coming out tonight. And I'm glad you're excited and I'm glad you're here. And we have a big lineup. I had no idea we had that many people signed up. So I'm excited. Thank you for doing this, Sarah. Thank you for hosting it. Thank you, Rita, for putting it on. Nice to see all the faces.
Thank you. So I'll just jump on for one moment. Welcome to our MFA in Writing and Publishing Student and Alum Next Reading. It'll be running from approximately 6:10ish until maybe 9 o'clock. We'll have a little break in between. And our host for this evening will be our second year student who's graduating, Sarah Stancliffe. So she's going to do a little bit of an intro to the reading and I'll let you know how the programming will go. So Sarah, take it away.
Hello, thank you. I'm very excited for this. I'm so happy to see all the faces and names. Along that note, we'll get started in just a minute, but I wanted to let you know how the Zoom call reading thing will go. Yes, unfortunately, the link, we've had some issues with the link. So if you know of anybody who is trying to get in who can't, send me a message and I can email it out. Yes. As far as the Zoom call goes, I believe that we're going to have this recording as soon as we start. That way, for folks who can't make it tonight, they'll be able to watch it later on. So if you want, go ahead and keep your video on. It's also okay if you keep it off or kind of flicker on and off. We do ask that you keep your volume muted when you're not speaking. That way we can make sure that the student readers are heard and we won't have any, sudden interruptions. Sorry, I'm distracted right now because I'm so happy to see people's faces showing up. Yes, okay. So this is definitely a big deal for me, and I think it's a big deal for a lot of us because this will be the final student reading of the MFA in Writing and Publishing program at VCFA. So we cast a net and asked folks who are interested in reading to sign up, and we asked some alumnics as well. We have a couple of people who are going to be reading tonight who have graduated from the program already. So you're in for a treat. There's a lot of talent. And I don't just mean myself. I am going to start us off though, just because I thought I knew I was going to be here, so I wouldn't be worried if somebody wasn't arriving on time. So what we'll do is I'll start reading and then I will introduce the reader who comes after me with their brief author bio. And then the next person will introduce the person after them. And that way we can all kind of participate and be at the mic, so to speak. We don't have enough time, or we don't have enough readers to fill 3 hours, which it kind of feels like a blessing. I think that would have been a very long night. So readers, feel free to take your time. There's no rush. I would just say maybe don't read for longer than like 15 minutes, just for the sake of consideration. But take your time. Feel free to also engage in as much or as little banter as you like. I've prepared some banter for this evening. I don't know if you can call it banter if it's planned, but we're gonna roll with it. Yes, so if you can access the Google Docs student readers, the lineup is updated and accurate, and you'll see who comes after you, and you'll see their bio too. And if anybody's not able to, just kind of say, Sarah, help. And I have it pulled up and I can do the intro really easily. Oh, thanks, Jay. Planned banter is valid banter. Let's see, I'm racking my brain. Is there anything I've forgotten to say? I think I've covered it. We will have a break. We're going to do a break about halfway through after the first 5 readers. We'll break for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how people feel, and come back. And I think I have 6 readers after that for the second half. And then we'll just end when we end and say our goodbyes and wander off into the night. That sounds dangerous. Don't do that, but you know what I mean. Oh, okay. I'm definitely nervous, but I do love this. So I'm not I'm not suffering, I'm just awkward. So without further ado, somebody was going to be really kind and introduce me. So I'm gonna let them do that now. Or I could introduce myself.
So Sarah, I would be happy to introduce you.
Oh,
I'd be delighted. Okay, so here we go. I'm so excited about Sarah's thesis and many of the theses of our graduating students this year. I've been kind of flipping through a lot of them. Sarah created this hybrid text, which is really phenomenal, of visual collage, poetry, essays, and I was singing its praises earlier today. And let me tell you a little bit more about Sarah Stancliffe. So Sarah Stancliffe is an interdisciplinary artist who blends samplings from poetry, creative nonfiction, and collage. She gets most fired up about the intersections of art, activism, embodied healing, and pleasure. She gravitates towards community-driven creative spaces and is dedicated to leveraging her experience in service of enabling others' artistic goals. So please give a round of applause and warm welcome to Sarah Stancliffe.
Thank you so much, Rita. Just to warn everybody, I will probably cry this evening. If you feel compelled, please don't hold back. This is definitely a warm and safe space for everyone to feel things. In that vein, I wanted to share some poetry tonight because and this is kind of funny. Earlier today at our Alumnix Mixer, I was talking about how VCFA ruined poetry for me, which is really just a snarky thing for me to say. It's more that I discovered that I am a lot more interested in the lived experience and the performance and the live aspect of poetry rather than finding it on the page. So I have some fridge magnet poems. I don't know if anybody hasn't heard me talk about them. I really love using that form to create. So yes, always tears, Aaron. So I thought that it might be a nice kind of full circle thing to read some poetry from the fridge magnet poems. The first one was written in July of 2018. And the last line in that poem is what I took the title of my thesis manuscript from. I haven't titled these fridge magnet poems, but this one we'll call How Lives Are Put Together. Lake water heaves over rock bed. I sing to the sky, my feet in the blue, a sad language, a whisper beating from my breast. Ugly goddess of love or lust, no less my mother though you crush me, and the soaring, delirious, repulsive need I have to be one. I want the dream, not to run away from storms, not some quick summer worshipping of skin and never using up a life with wanting. I ask you, shadow woman, show me how lives are put together. That's one that people have probably heard several times. I love to read it. But I thought I would read my more recent fridge magnet poems now. These have all been written, created, moved around on my fridge in 2020 or beyond. So this next one is from March 12th, 2020. This was, of course, pre-pandemic, where I am. And I wrote this one for my sisters and also for all women who I consider my sisters. I'm drunk on sisters, with these, mine, old and youthful and favorite. We little women, the boyish, restless, wild bird, the darkness dissolved. We are shots to the face, the arm, head to feet, shots hissing to the sky, fierce. Girlfriend persona, a riddle. Press her from peace, she shows rich, bitter day bed body language, roasted beneath mercurial sun, quick to change, from drinking white peach froth in drooling heat to Gemini storm a smoky mocha mug. Yes, woman is warm, purring, buzzing, stirring down your throat, so drink. Like water we cool, hot, spring, whisper, break, boil, summer, scream, move always as one together. The next one was the next one. I'll be totally honest. Was written when I was upset. It's about family, and I had spent some time living with my family when the pandemic hit, and quickly discovered that it's really hard to make decisions for a whole group when you're in this heightened state of anxiety, and everybody has different ideas of what to do and how and when and everything. And I may or may not have been having some feelings about family when I wrote this, specifically my dad, my stepdad. But this one is for fathers because I'm really, truly very lucky to have a dad and a stepdad who contribute so much to my life, not just by giving me things to write about. This is from May 2nd, 2020. What is the word for man, mother? I have water, bother, together, Java, his always black coffee. Maybe this is how it comes. Some cold comfort from my caffeine habits. But please stop now, you with your imagined riddled language life.
Pull out a gang
There's been a
shit.
recall. Oh.
Put that on gang on my side.
Oh. Hey, Devin, can you remove that person?
Pull out a gang shit, nigga.
Yes, hold on, sorry.
Thanks. Oh.
Should be gone.
Thanks, Devin. Sorry about that, all. We had this set up with a registration so that things like that wouldn't happen. Everybody okay? We're gonna move forward. All right, not let them ruin our night.
Yep. Carry on.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Okay. Where was I? There's been a recall on fire pit smoke shows, on buzzache come morning, on say when to milk and sugar, on playing favorite. I am, more or less, my only person. This whole Gemini home, little women and men versatile to need. The moon, as she brews from a seed. Okay. Yes, great suggestion, Sarah. Okay. The next one is from August 5th, 2020.
Sarah, I'm just going to mute everybody and then I'm going to unmute you really quick.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome. We are doing this. We are figuring this out together. Okay. So this one is written August 5th, 2020. And I'm probably not the only one who had the experience of trying to figure out how in the world to live in the situation that we were in with the pandemic and with so much upheaval and unrest in our country. And of course, there's always unrest. Things are always breaking and being put back together. But when we were also isolated in our little boxes, it felt even harder to figure out how to do that, especially on an individual, local level. So this is kind of what that was prompted by. We've been through this together almost every morning. Harmony is asking us over to place thought above friendless urges toward mess, to make peace, to make lives. I try. Adding the language of coffee love. Begin with worshipful roast of reason, grind smooth. Pour steaming affection over. Let's sit, snooze, imagine, percolate. See this brew spirit into change and want it. Bring enemy and friend like a pot of milk, a cup of sweetness, one home to another, mind to mind. Be good company. Share your best and freshest. Thank you, guys. You all. Another thing that happened being in grad school throughout a pandemic is that my body changed and not necessarily in a way that I loved. It did not feel good. Mostly just doing a lot of sitting, being really sedentary, and feeling kind of stuck. And I have had a very hard time with that. And I wrote this poem September 27th, 2020, about that feeling. I rip my hair into tiny pieces. I let my dress fall, ask the ache to please go too. Mind, liquid sugar in a caffeinated head, the face a mug, frothing tongue, mercurial breast and boiling arms, smoking bare, fingers fiddle, paw, swat at nothing, fur like a cat or bear, whiskers, empty eggs drop safely through quiet blood, a luscious butt soft with indecisive meat. This stalk, beneath skin a rock, to sit presses sad and raw. Feet stir long shadows. The spirit is a sea tiger, the voice black forest moon. Imagine being able to change what is the language of body. Some days a goodness, always home. This apparatus, my companion. We all became more snuggly. I like that way of looking at it. Okay, this one I wrote November 30th, 2020. You know what? I should also say a lot of these poems were only possible because of amazing, wonderful, lovely people who have given me these little sets of fridge magnet words, and a lot of them are themed. So you might have noticed coffee themes. There, I have a cat themed set, a Gemini set, and then I was recently given. Oh, there's a set on peace, and then I was recently given a set that has to do with writing, and being a writer. And so I think this was the first poem I wrote with that new set. Some novel thought comes to me. Picture this. I move through the world chasing romance, changing my life for love. I need beauty, so I see chances in all things. Full dreams of discovering another, fashioned from fiction, fall short. Grown girls and boys become little villains in my poems. My pages ache with when, why, how, what does it mean to play, to crush, to please? I find this still a mystery. Yet now I place my body into the story. How do I know her wants and needs? What is the description of her character? Urges come and go, those little dramas. I begin to recall my questions, answers. This next one, I will admit, is out of order. This is the most recent one that I wrote in April, and the last piece that I'm gonna read after that was written before, but I just like the order, so I'm doing it that way, because I can. This is from April 7th, 2021. My words are breaking from where? Aren't I a sentence maker, song smoker, that thing who tastes music and says so? Tells the rain to be still or beat in harmony. The woman driving the symphony? But all my languages are tense and bored. Everyone smelling like another. They climb from the water, these monsters of lake and sea, curling away from my questions. What is a body but a volume of water for the food of story to be tongued from? Could I change its meaning, its romancing of the shore, if I wanted to? This is the last one. Thank you guys. I also realized I have no idea how long I've been reading. So if I've gone 15 minutes or over, forget what I said before and take all the time you want. We've got it. All right, this one was written January 12th, 2021. Come to me, word. I move the world with you. There is no thing new the sun can reveal, but I chase this life at night. There I find beauty in dream thoughts, in the gown of becoming. I am a little poetry, a little paragraph, pages of changing what it means when why or how doesn't come with an answer. A mystery play this still seems to be. What a way to live. How do I place me into the story? At once author and character. Science and magic are one. Come and go, you tiny dramas, you every instant urge, old bittersweet whispers who lap at my ears. I am making something over, moving between worlds, creating open sky where there was none. These are my beginnings. And I'll stop there.
I'm gonna do the remuting thing just so we can have everybody talk to you. Okay, everybody should be able to talk if they want to.
Brava. We can do some applause. Thank you, Sarah.
Beautiful, Sarah.
Well done, Sarah.
Yay!
Good job. Good job.
Sarah.
Oh, thank you all. It's now going to be my great pleasure to introduce our next reader, who happens to be Darla Hitchcock. Darla is a certified late bloomer working on a new career at an age when most people think of retirement. She is proud of her work as a student, the MFA she will earn on the 15th, and finishing her thesis. She looks forward to the next chapter of her life. Let's all welcome Darla to the stage.
Thank you, Sarah. Oh, look who has been ignoring me for all this time. And then suddenly it's my turn to read, and there he is. So I'm going to read from my thesis. And this is a scene with a character who's a brand new mother, and her grandmother raised her, wasn't very nice. This character doesn't trust women very much, so she doesn't have she doesn't have any women to call on with all the problems of new motherhood, so she's doing it on her own. At this moment in her life, Angela not only loved, but felt loved, enveloped by love, floating on a cloud of love, buoyed by love, hers, the baby's, and Kay's. She wished this feeling would never end, this feeling of finally belonging. She was home. She could relax and bask in this feeling, bask in this love. The feeling didn't last, of course. A week later, when the sleep deprivation that every parent knows took its toll, she still loved her baby. She still loved her man, but damn, she was starting to resent them. Not much, just a tickle at the back of her consciousness, but it was enough to make her worry, make her furrow her beautiful brow, make her vacillate between judging herself and judging her newborn child. Not to mention judging Kay, who wasn't doing near his fair share of baby care as far as she was concerned. She hadn't had but one bath since the baby was born, just one. She had to have another, and she had to have it today. When Rose fell asleep, Angela started heating water. She tidied up while she waited, brushed her teeth, made the bed, looked in more resentment at dishes in the sink, washed those in cold water, and checked her pots on the stove. Finally, the water was hot. She poured it into the tub and mixed it with cold for the perfect temperature. She had just taken her robe off and started to climb in when Rose awoke. Angela took one wet, steaming foot from the tub, wiped it on the rug, and with a sigh, tied her robe around her and headed to pick up the crying infant, which she did a little quicker and less gently than she meant to. The baby made the face of a Chinese dragon, which made Angela grievously sad. She took a breath and rocked Rose in her arms and began to walk around the room. "Oh, you're my little baby, aren't you? My poor little sad baby. I'm sorry I made you cry, my sweetness. I'm sorry I scared you." The sound of the mother's voice, along with the walking and rocking, calmed the baby. "You need your mama, don't you, my baby girl? Well, I'm here now." She nuzzled her child and her resentment melted away. She did love this child. How could she not? This baby was her life. How could she resent her? How could she not give her all to this tiny, darling, helpless child? What kind of miscreant was she? What kind of awful, misbegotten monster? Sadness engulfed her, then desolation. Tears spilled down her cheeks. How could she begrudge her own beloved child, her own flesh and blood? How could she be so horrible? She stopped walking and rocking and sobbed. Her chest heaved, which set the baby to crying again, which made Angela sob harder, then wail, and the baby squalled. And Angela rocked the baby again and yowled. And Kay walked into the room to see his young wife and his young daughter rocking in the middle of the floor, rocking and swaying and crying and bawling and keening like banshees or wild coyotes or pit foxes with their otherworldly screams, with tears falling down their faces like waterfalls, set to drown them both in their grief. "What on earth is wrong?" asked a perplexed Kay. "I'm a bad mom," Angela shrieked and fell into mewling. "Oh, honey," said Kay, gathering his woman and child in his arms. "You're not a bad mom. You're not. Come on, let's sit down." He took the baby and led Angela to the bed and set her down, then sat down herself. He grabbed a clean diaper from the bedside table and used it to dry his weeping wife's eyes. Angela explained to him how she had wanted a bath and how the baby had woken up just as the water was warm and how she resented the baby because she couldn't take a bath. "I'm awful," she gulped. "No, honey, you're not. This is normal. You're a new mother and it's exhausting." He said this with some confidence since he had already been through this with 3 previous daughters and his first wife, who, he had to admit to himself, was never shy about saying what she needed. "I was amazed that you were handling this so well, not asking for help, but not taking it when it was offered. I'm here for you, Ange. All you have to do is let me know what you want." "I want a bath." "Then you'll have a bath. I'll watch, Rose. It's probably cold. Then I'll warm it for you." And he did, all the while carrying the now calm and burgling baby. When Angela was done with her bath, he bundled her into bed and let her sleep, only bringing the baby to her when it was time to nurse, which the exhausted mother did without really even waking up. The next day, Kay searched throughout his shop and even asked at neighboring farms for the parts he needed to fix the hot water heater. And by the day after that, Angela could turn the tap instead of heating water on the stove. Then, on the third day, something miraculous happened. Sandy showed up to take care of Angela and help her figure out how to be a mother. The first thing she did was tell Angela about the absolutely normal, yet completely unnerving and utterly overwhelming roller coaster ride of plummeting hormones and total maternal exhaustion. Thank you. So I should have told you guys that this was a post-apocalyptic story. So that's why the water heater wasn't working, but now you know.
Darla, that was
Oh,
amazing.
I
I love that section. Yeah. Do you have access to who you're going to introduce next, my friend?
yeah, I do. I just forgot because I was nervous.
Well played. You handled that brilliantly.
Okay. Oh, hopefully I can. Oh, it may not let me.
Hey, you'll be introducing Micah.
Okay, here we go. Word weaver Micah de la Cueva was born in the Philippines with the ocean on her skin and mountains on her back. Her writing has a gentle nature that is often contrasted by the harsh reality of her stories. She is an MFA candidate writing a memoir about a young woman surviving trauma and finding her voice in the chaos and unknown.
Hi guys, can you hear me well? I'll be reading a couple of poems, some trigger warning, racism, violence, drug abuse, and suicide ideation. My first poem references to the biblical David, who was a who was one of the favorite kings. Brown people are not God's favorites. No, God's favorites have been cattled, displayed in human zoos. Children gawked for their brown skins, a forgotten race. How the heavens only sing choruses about the Davids of the world. The person who holds the gun, takes the land, becomes the cattler. I wish to be God's favorite, adorned with milk skin, my nipples pink. I want no brown skin, no random check-ins at airports. I want to walk the supermarket aisle without the hover of a white body. I want the white lover not to tell me I am still trying to get used to you. To be a David of the world, God would not count our sins against us. He would not strike our bodies heavy with violent hands. The fingers joke around our necks, knees on our backs. From clay, God does not mold us. From dust, we stay. Thank you. My next poem is called To Be 30. A teacher once asked if I lived in the dirty side of the Philippines. I had to think what she meant. If she meant a part easier to ignore homeless kids on the street sides with cardboard blankets curled up like street dogs. If dirty meant poor meant eating rice with soy sauce because mama couldn't afford meat. If poor meant illiterate meant when my dad dropped high school and did drugs instead. If illiterate meant stupid meant when his brother grew up not knowing how to read and write. If stupid meant me in that new white school barely knowing English, I felt like a weathered rock knuckled down when I pronounced a word wrong. From a sheet of paper to a sheet of paper, I was smoothed away to my smallest form to the point I said no. I do not come from the dirty side. I carried myself upright as if I always had access to clean clothes, to clean water, to a clean life. Thank you guys. I have just a little bit more. Thank you guys. I am also a little bit nervous. Of the sun. How many times have I fizzled my short-tempered days, forcing them to stay in my stomach? When I left the Philippines, I learned to quiet the voice I inherited from my father and his mother, rugged, full of sun and volume. Back then, I wanted to be completely made of earth the way my mother's mother wanted me. The sun would rise and fall in my lungs all year round, and I'd still deny its existence within me. Before my mother was my mother, Inaipo already loved me as her own. I memorized the sun on her clothes, the way it clings on her skin, as if it's already made its way home. Not like how the sun clung on me, newly burnt. In the mornings, I studied the lines on Inaipo's face and grazed my pinky on her eyelids. The sun hits Inaipo's place differently. It's pure heat that bites the skin. My cousins told me to stay in the shade, worried my lighter skin would look like theirs. They joked that my mother's side would never let me visit them again if I went back 2 shades darker. A whiff of all the whitening soap came back to me. I remember my mother's mother stacking them under the bathroom sink. Even when the heat was at its peak, the family was still out on the terrace, skin to skin, telling stories and jokes. Inaipo fed me fruits and snacks my mouth has missed all these years. Creamy sweet, sometimes sour guyabano, soft pastillas, its sugar sticking on my gum, and mais con hielo with condensed milk and shaved ice to cool my tongue. Thank you. I think I have about just a couple more. Two kids from the concrete. On the rooftop, we breathe the same quiet. Your left foot leans on my right leg. Nothing has changed. Your mom has not come back for 15 years, and my mom is off somewhere again. We stay together at the edge of family pictures, remain at the corner of dining tables, where I fill your bowl with yesterday's soup as you take the fish bones off of my plate. On a boat, the sun exhales on our skin. The shore people seem so distant as we become unmoving, like mountains. Then you look at me before falling into the water. Of course, I follow. Never mind the sharp ridges of the sea. For a while, we are no one's daughters, simply two bodies floating. On the bedroom floor, the last breath of heat is caught in our hairs, tangled between us. With half-closed eyes, you call for your mom. I take your fist into my palm, finger by finger, I uncurl them. Our knees touch. Surely we have been sleeping like this since birth. Two curled bodies side by side, but by morning I will be at the airport and I will also leave you behind. Sunken body still asleep on the floor. The next poem is called The Family Head. You showed up at my door as ice turned water, cradling a baby in your arms, like how ripples of the ocean carry the sunlight's glow. We celebrated Rojun and his half-open fists and tiny feet. Then, the pause. I knew you needed me to wear the scapular again. I should have known what it meant to accept our uncle's scapular. I wished the ritual for the next pinuno was more obvious, traditional. A family feast is had. Tito would spend the next decade telling me stories of the last 3 mountains. Mamai's healing stones, our Lola's wooden chair, and his brown scapular. I'd be prepared rather than a wind-blown leaf. You still your waves. No matter how selfish I want to be, I know the mountain always watches over the ocean and its rivers. So I wear the scapular, memorize the untold stories, and pretend the last inking is done. I kiss Rojun's soles to say he won't go barefoot as his mother and I have gone. I'll get the family blessing. I tell her I'll go before you and clear the path. Don't you know our family has never known a volcanic mountain? There is magma within me they have yet to see. The next poem, coincidentally, is called Volcanic Woman. I body block the space between man, catcalling cousin, how fear of man in stomach turns lava on its way to throat. Look how I looked at white man with pure cold eyes, say you don't own sun. You don't own sun. Brown men are no different. In my native land, I watch eyes on me, eyes on cousins. I creep to see eye trails on our necks, bellies, legs. Bodies turned our way, go on. I am waiting for a shoe step or a hand reach. Trigger the primal beast, the way a volcano calls on wild animals to stampede out on streets, sprouting to warn humans, you don't own land. The desire to protect is heavier than your body mass. I've body and hands and teeth. See how fast body can spring. Clawed fingers carve your skin. You don't own night either. Fanged mouth, I need no mountains to call on me. I shapeshift on my own. Yeah, this is the poem I wrote last semester. And then this one, the last one is called The Prophecy. When the world ends, I come back, first as a red horse, burning through the fields of corrupt men. See the moon over the sun as fire drops pour from the sky. Then as a blazed forest where these great men hide, but they do not outrun me. My fire trails turn to flesh from ash to dust to soil. I am the hot wind, freeing every muffled cry as I pierce guilty nations in half. When the world ends, no violent acts against us go unseen, unpunished. Wrath upon wrath upon wrath tear the ground and swallow men in the river fire. As for the unbelievers and to those who made war against us, they fall to their knees, they go in deep mourning as their mouths dry up. They search for rain, but the blackened sky remained shut. And at last I will be a trumpet of peace. A new song will rise. It will come in the form of my war cry. Half shrill, half honey. Thank you.
That was amazing, Micah. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Really nice to hear you read. You're going to be introducing Eli, and I put the bio in your chat, so you can read it off the chat.
Thank you, Sarah.
My pleasure.
I'm honored to introduce one of the loveliest people I've met, Eli Jacobs. Eli Jacobs is an MFA candidate and writer always striving to make fiction weirder. She is currently working on a novel about a girl turning into a fish, a novel where magic exists alongside blood in our veins, a poetry collection about sister snakes that eat each other's tails, and much more. She was born and raised in Maryland, where she is currently drinking coffee. Everyone, Eli Jacobs.
Wow, I'm gonna cry. Oh my gosh. Thank you for that, Micah. I'm going to be reading from a short story that I've been working on over the course of this semester. And part of it was actually inspired by Micah's work, just how she plays with white space on the page in her fiction. So I hope that comes through for my reading as well. But this is a horror piece, by the way, so I hope you like ghosts. Where is it? Okay. The house was painted yellow. Yellow, the color of sunflowers, stretching out to sip on the morning's sweet rays. I'm trying to make this so I can actually see things. Okay, sorry. Yellow, the color of sunflowers, stretching out to sip on the morning's sweet rays. Yellow, the color of that warm ball of gas positioned just far enough away that it couldn't burn up this glorious and green planet. yellow, the color of my toothache. An uncomfortable twinge biting into the bone, rooted deep in my adult mouth, which only seemed to grow more prominent the longer I stood in that house. Awful, ugly, and firm. The house whose ownership now fell to me in an unfortunate stroke of luck for the both of us. 3308 Ivers Lane was mine now because my dad died. You learn all sorts of things when people die. You learn how much you loved them or how much you didn't. You learn which pieces of stained furniture they felt your aunt needed and how greedy your second cousin Philip really is, coming around sniffing for money. I learned a lot of things when my dad died. I had expected to. But learning that he'd been the owner of this ugly, yellow Victorian for over 30 years in secret was the strangest of all. He'd hated old things. He was a modernist who thrived on minimalism, who'd stamped out my mother's interest in antiquing when they finally married, the kind of man who only allowed his daughter one Barbie. The house swayed heavy on its foundations. The house weighed heavy on me. Even before I got there, I hadn't wanted the place when the lawyer handed me the keys. It was his other family that had wanted the house, the wife and daughter that had replaced us. My father must have known when he'd written the will that they'd scream and cry and retch for every cent that came my way. I might have let them have it and been done with the whole thing, but I couldn't. He'd given it to me. Not his sister Beth or brother Charles, not my plethora of older cousins, not his newer family that he had always loved better. I don't know how long I stood there, caught in the doorway. The threshold of the place had a way of catching you, holding you and your thoughts and your heart in place. I had to force my way through into the foyer. It was like stepping inside a held breath. There was a jacket still hung on a coat stand by the door, a vase of fresh flowers only just beginning to droop on a small table below a window, a mirror. Wow. I stepped forward and the floorboards did not complain. Looking into the sitting room, there was a fire slowly dying in the fireplace. It crackled yellow. Had someone been here recently? A caretaker or realtor the lawyer hadn't mentioned? It was all so perfect that I thought I might have walked into the wrong home, or had stepped backward in time. I walked slowly into the living room. The love seat and armchairs were still full and rosy pink. It made me think of old makeup. My grandmother used to wear that shade as a blush applied to the apple of her cheeks. She'd have the warmest smile. Sometimes I would see it before her pink cheeks bobbed downward in a frown when she saw me. She would have liked this place, would have kept it in this kind of condition. But she'd been as surprised as I was to learn of its existence at all. There was something too still about the building, too quiet. I found myself holding my breath too, and hard to move. My whole jaw began to ache. I shouldn't have left my purse in the car. I needed something for this. I crouched down, clutching my stomach in the middle of the foyer, a wave of nausea hitting me as the pain grew tightly acute in my jaw. Like something new, hard, and sharp was growing there. It was only then that I thought I heard something. Maybe it was my own moan. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was the echo of my father in his hospital bed, the gasping sound he'd made just before his eyes stood still and froze. I walked back out to my car. I decided to come back with Henry. This was too much. The toothache. The undusty shelves. Alone. Hungry. Alone and hungry. Alone and hungry and old. Alone and hungry and old. I have waited. Waited for what? For what? Not sure. Never sure. But need something. Need like ache. Want like fire. Want like self. I wait for want. Wait for need. Wait for someone to need because I need someone so long. alone, so long bored, so long frozen, so long dying. Once there was a woman here, and she walked through these doors, and she smiled big and wide, and I remembered living, and remembered eating, and touching, and speaking, but then she didn't anymore. I wait. I am here. I am not here. I walk, I clean. Here? Here. Where here? How long? Sometimes asleep, sometimes awake, was asleep again. Since the man locked the doors, now awake. Something woke me up. Something here. Someone. Lady here. Lady opens door. Lady ripe and young and pretty. Hello, lady. Can you hear me? You stand inside. You breathe inside my breathing. My house, my home, my stomach. You are here. I am here. Do you hear me? I have waited for so long. Please listen. Please stay. You are so pretty. Pretty little teeth, shiny like stars. I used to watch the stars, but now they fall where I don't have eyes to watch. Do you feel me? Why fall? Why scare? Why fear? She turned, she leaves, goes away. Why go? Why pain? Come back, lady. I need you, lady. I am starving for you. You, I need, I want, I am. Return, lady. Return. Of course, Henry laughed at me on the ride back when I said I couldn't be in that house alone. He was not the kind of person that considered what emotions were hidden behind expressions. He barely got so far as to consider the ones clearly readable on my face. Ariana, you need a dentist and maybe a therapist, but you don't need me. It's a house. How hard is it to do a walkthrough on your own? Somehow I appreciated the way that Henry always turned my inner thoughts back out to me without meaning to. Maybe that's why I was staying with him. I was trying to figure out why I was with him when my dad was in the hospital, when Henry let me go there alone. It's not his fault, really. But the thing about Henry is that he likes me, that he wants me, and at least is satisfied enough with me that he doesn't want to push me away. And with both my parents now dead, it seemed like the only thing that made any sort of sense anymore. Now that they were gone, he was the only thing, like family, that wanted me. I'm just telling you how it seemed. I'm not asking you to believe me. I looked out the window of his pickup truck and watched the long and winding country road melt away. I had always loved sitting in cars, a cassette in the stereo, a dream in my head. I always loved being a passenger, watching the world, imagining some invisible man running alongside us, trying to catch up, trying to catch my attention. I wonder what kind of life that invisible man led. Why didn't he need me? Why was he desperate? What drove a man to such strange and desperate desires? Did this man, who I sometimes imagined running on all fours, naked and long-limbed and barely human from how many years he'd spent chasing cars, know any more what he was after? Or just that he was looking for somebody, for someone that wouldn't hit the gas and drive away, fear glinting off their mirrors, that little spark of mirror light, the only thing he had to eat for days. And that's where I'm gonna cut that off.
That was incredible.
Thank
are
you.
a great reader. You really do. You really are a great reader. So, Eli, you are going to have to gather yourself a little bit to introduce the next person.
Right, I forgot.
And yeah, you have
you.
I put the bio in your private chat. So
Awesome. I'm going to be introducing Rebecca Jameson, who is a writer, editor, teacher, and alumnus of the Writing and Publishing program. Her publications include Entropy, The Offing, Hunger Mountain, Rattle, and the chapbook of poetry, The Body of All Things, from Finishing Line Press. Rebecca is the nonfiction editor of the Sale magazine and teaches creative writing classes grounded in mindfulness through her business, Contemplate Create.
Hi, everyone. It is so lovely to be here and listen to all of the amazing readers. I have chills every time somebody reads. I'm just like, ah, yeah, this is definitely the best night of the year. So yeah, the pandemic and not being in grad school has just squashed my writing under a gigantic boulder, but I'm persevering anyway. And so this is a new essay I'm going to read just an excerpt from. And I'm very fortunate to have some folks from VCFA that are keeping me consistent with some kind of writing practice. And I thank them for their participation and getting this essay out of me. So it's called The Wilderness. Hiking alone has always been a balance between fear and delight. Delight, the heavy, cold humidity of the Cascade rainforests, that high, golden, late summer light over countless miles of dark, breathing wilderness. Douglas firs, hemlock, and western red cedar piled on top of each other, bark perfumed with moss and rainwater. My boots took thousands of steps on trails that were muddy, dusty, gravelly, full of roots. Sometimes a rivulet of water from a wayward creek flowed across the trail and off down the mountain, finding its way back to itself. Fear, the constant looming feeling that something bad could happen to me at any moment, whether that was a sprained ankle, a tumble down a cliff, a dangerous man, wild animals, a broken down car, or no cell service if I needed it. The 10 years I lived in Oregon, I hiked by myself often, discovering new trails, new views, new limits to my bravery and my legs' ability to carry me. I hiked alone in the Willamette National Forest, Mount Hood National Forest, the Wallowas, the Santiam, the Columbia River Gorge, Gifford Pinchot, the Huckleberry Salmon Wilderness, and more. Sometimes I hiked alone because I worked multiple part-time jobs and couldn't find friends who were free when I was. But often I hiked alone simply because I loved the feeling of it. The sun sifting down through the dense canopy and finding my face, birdsong not drowned by human speech, the wind on my skin and the vast open space when I reached the summit. Mountains and rivers and trees all humming with aliveness, and me a part of it. On the trail, something crumpled up inside of me unfurled itself. Perhaps the scariest thing about hiking alone were my own thoughts. I couldn't always tell when my fear was a sign that something bad was about to happen, or when it was just the anxious scurrying of my mind. Others often amplified my fear, reinforcing the message that it was unsafe for women to hike alone. My friend Jen, one of the most adventurous people I knew, who loved the outdoors and regularly went hiking, kayaking, mountain biking, whitewater rafting, and mountaineering with other people, told me with a shudder that she refused to hike by herself. Once, a woman stopped me at a trailhead near Joseph and beseeched me not to hike the short, easy trail alone, her fear vibrating through me like a rattle. She didn't give a reason, but I understood her perfectly. I was a woman, alone. In many people's minds, I had no business being by myself in the wilderness. I was not supposed to want to hear only the sound of my own breath mixed with wind and the sighing of trees. If I forgot my fear for only a moment and let myself wander away from the safety of other people, the protection of men, something bad would happen to me. And in many people's minds, it would be my fault for not listening to fear, for not letting it rule me. The grass was tall and the afternoon light brushed it honey and amber. The Wallowas rose dark and mysterious above the golden prairie. In the distance, I could just see the blue water of the lake reflecting the sky. I nodded politely as I listened to the woman, but when she finally got back in her car and drove away, I started walking. But despite the gently waving grasses and achingly beautiful mountains, my heart hammered in my ears, and I kept expecting a half-crazed man to jump out of every bush. Fear had sucked any pleasure I might have gotten from the hike, and I was gripped in its clutches too tightly to sense which anxieties might be real and which were only imagined. The line felt blurry, and I didn't want to take any chances. I turned around. Back at my car, I sank into its safety with a mixture of relief and disappointment. I watched the sky turn peach, gold, and crimson through my bug-splotched windshield. Yet despite my fear and the fear of other people, nothing bad ever happened to me when I was alone on a trail with a backpack and water bottle. So I kept going, kept venturing into the wilderness alone, exploring the edge between fear and adventure. I had yet to learn that when real danger came, the source would be from other humans. And I will leave it there. Thanks, everyone. And I think we're going into a break now, but when we come back, I will be introducing Noni.
Yeah, so I think we're just going to take a little 10-minute break, and 5 to 10-minute break. You're welcome to hang out, unmute yourselves and chat to each other. Devin is on it, and if we get any more freaks joining us and trying to take over, just tag Devin. Try and take care of it quickly so that we don't have to deal with that again. Thank you all. Rebecca, that was an amazing story. I love your essays. I love your writing and how you present them. So really nice work from all of you. So let's have a little moment and just hang out, unmute, chat, do your thing, everybody.
How about some applause? Awesome. I love Tim's image. That's really great. So feel free to chat, catch up with folks. We've got 10 minutes. I see Uka on there. Hey, Uka. Hey, so good to see you. So we have a wonderful round of students coming up in the second half. So feel free to say hi. If you need to take a bio break, feel free to do that. See you in 10 minutes.
And Eric.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So we're delighted to continue our student and alumnex reading for the MFA in Writing and Publishing program. And I believe Rebecca Jameson, our alumnex, is going to introduce our next speaker.
Yes, so I have the pleasure of introducing Noni Salma. Noni is a film enthusiast and screenwriter who is passionate about decolonizing the narratives of queer folks of color by centering them in her writing in ways that are fresh, inspiring, and kicking. At the heart of her storytelling is her 30s, fully realized self finding her way back to her frightened, stunted teenage version, whose wildest dreams she lives on the page. Give it up for Noni.
Hi, I'm a little nervous, but I want to read a piece that I wrote a while back, but I've kind of got into recently editing and finding the way that I feel currently through it. So, it's called My Daddy's Daughter. So here it is. I've thought of several ways to write this story. One way would be a eulogy, to celebrate a love that once stood in my life like a monument, a love that announced itself every morning like the salutation of the Bata drum. But that would be an incomplete story, a misnomer. This is not a love story or a story of a child missing a father. This is a story of a father chasing a lost shadow. This is a story of many feelings, a celebration of them. This is a story of a child who's not a dream come true. There are different names you could call your male parent. One would be father, another would be daddy. Depending on your relationship with him, one could fit like a glove, while the other would feel like a horse swapped midstream. I call mine daddy because that's what we've always called him. Me and my 3 siblings, the man whose presence hovered like candle wax mid-drop, ready to burn at the grazing of skin during my childhood, the one I grew up learning like a map. I've been reading the metaphorical link tree to my life lately, who I was versus who I am now. I was so many things. I was my parents' child, their first child. I was a scared, quiet, shriveled kid who feared nothing more than the sound of their own voice. I was smart, still smart. But in class, the sound of my own voice not only unnerved me, but it did the people around me. How do you sound like a girl, but you're a boy? Why do you walk like that, like you have a spring in your steps? Soon, I knew that the less I spoke, the least views people got. I failed, sorry. I failed at being a regular kid in school. I failed at being my parents' child, even. See, my parents had me while they were dating. Daddy was a university graduate, full of prospects, but broke nonetheless. My mother was, well, living in a parent's house as a daughter. So they had me, and they had some form of civil union. Whatever it was, I don't particularly know, but because of me, they became husband and wife. They loved each other, I think. So it wasn't exactly a union of inconvenience, but I was the reason it happened when it did. So they had me, what they thought at the time was a boy. I think of my mother, the growing young woman, oblivious of the future, the dream she had for that child at first. I think of how much I was raised with those expectations. I do not think she ever envisaged a child could be trans if she knew what that was. I think of how I feel that dream. I think of daddy, who wanted me to study medicine at university because, according to him, I was very smart and that was a good profession to put my intellect to use. Not minding that could not stand the sight of my own blood or anybody else's. I was his first, and he wanted a doctor for a child, the way many Nigerian parents do. I also feel that dream of his. And when he saw the handwritings on the wall, that I wanted nothing more than to study art tried to bargain with me to meet him in the middle and study something more prestigious like accounting. I failed that too for 2 years. In school, I rarely showed up for classes or exams, and I ended up with a CGPA of 0. Yeah, 0. For 2 years, I think that was my most epic failure. And I remember Daddy's anger the night he discovered my low grades. I remember the words he called me, never do well, because who comes out with a CGPA of 0? I think it was at that point that he knew that the jig was up and that the only way forward was to let me study my course of choice. So I ended up studying creative arts. And although I had his support, I could see how unfulfilled he was, especially when a friend of his would ask what I was studying in school. He would say with that sore post-lemon sock face, creative art. I sometimes imagine him thinking to himself, what on earth are you going to do in the world with creative art? What do you call a male parent who is no longer in your life? I don't mean dead, because that would mean you're fatherless. Is there a word you call a father who decides you're persona non grata? Ex-father, maybe, the way your boyfriend becomes your ex-boyfriend? See why I call him daddy? That way, that seems like a word that's immovable. Daddy is not a title, it's an event that happened. I remember I was in Manhattan restaurant, July 2016 for a friend's birthday dinner when the same friend asked me if I'd heard that my family had disowned me. He said it the way you inform someone that their favorite restaurant had closed down. Disappointing, but not tragic. What had led to that moment was that I had started medical and social transition, blossomed from a caterpillar to a butterfly. And I granted an interview with an online radio, which I thought nobody listened to. I'd even jokingly said to a friend that I probably would be listened to by 5 people and I will be one of them. But that interview found its way out of the obscure network into the page of a popular Nigerian journalist and snowballed into a viral media sensation in Nigeria. Like everyone else, that he found out about his daughter through the World Wide Web. And in return, it may have only been fear that I also found out that I had been disowned on the internet. My body did its thing by being first calm, then it sprung up in jitters, like a cold shower on a limp body. It wasn't as if I hadn't seen this coming. It wasn't the first time Daddy had toyed with disowning me. All the days of my incessant running away and grandma advising him to, the days I heard him mumbling if he made the right choice by not listening to her, it had finally happened. Daddy breaking up with me, that was a thing. The airlines were brutal. Whoever the person they were plastered across the airlines was, I didn't recognize her. I must have got lost in there somewhere between the misgendering and dead naming, between the curses in the comment section and the pearl and purse clutching. There is a kind of death that happens when you see your image decimated in the press, when people decide who you are and tell it to themselves and other people. It is a nameless death, and I'm still yet to find the body. So I'm going to introduce Uka. Ukamaka Lisakwe was named one of the continent's most promising writers under the age of 40 by the UNESCO World Book Capital for the Africa 39 project. In 2018, she won the Vermont College of Fine Arts Emerging Writer Scholarship for the MFA in Writing and Publishing program. A finalist for the Miles Moreland Writing Scholarship, she is the author of Orgadima.
Thank you so much, Nani, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you so much for sharing your story. You never cease to amaze me. Yeah, I'm so happy to be back here to my first family in the United States. Yeah, I'm a bit emotional. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of faces: Rita Banerjee, Makaya Gold, Molly, Erin, Rebecca, Nina, everyone. I haven't seen them in a very long time. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, without taking much of the time, I would like to read. I had thought of reading from my novel, but I felt, no, I should do something new. So recently, just a quick preface to what I'm about to read. Recently, I started researching what it means to be a Nigerian woman, what it means to be an Igbo woman in pre-colonial Nigeria, before the invasion of the British, before settler colonialism and religious colonialism. And it saddened me that I couldn't find any document that chronicled the life of the Igbo woman. Mostly what we have are documents by men who interpreted the thoughts of the women, what it means to be a woman giving birth to a twin child in an era where twin children were considered an abomination and discarded, disposed. How did the women feel? What does it mean to be pregnant and having that fear sitting in the bottom of your stomach? And then at the end of delivery, your husband disposes that child, banishes you because he considers you polluted. So I've been doing a lot of research and I found a lot of documents, but then it's men talking about what it feels like to be a man in that period, them interpreting that thought. So what I am doing with my current project is to give voices to those women, to do what Helen Sixu would call them, reimagining that voice, recreating the voice, sort of banishing the masculine voice. So what I'm doing is just to give voice to those women. And it's also very difficult because how did the Igbo woman in the late 1800s and early 1900s, how did she talk? Did she speak in parables? So it's been a challenging project, but I'm just going to read briefly from what I have. So I'll read from chapter 4. The woman's hair was cropped close to her scalp and was bounded with a scarf, her ankles and hands adorned with heavy bands of ivory. She tightened the knot of her plaid-like wrapper firmly around over her chest. Her face and arms were slicked down with oil so that her skin caught the sun and gleamed when she turned at strategic angles. "Whose wife are you?" she asked Ifeyinwa, suspicious gaze going over the girl's body, the triple lines of scarification blobs that traveled from her neck, passed between her breasts, down her navel, before disappearing under the short wrapper tied around her waist. "I am not anybody's wife," Ifeyinwa told her, and wished again that she had wrapped her head with a piece of cloth to shield herself from curious gaze. Having fled her new husband's home with only the cloth around her waist, people were going to talk and they were going to ask questions. But Ifeyinwa had left in a haste, and now she wished she had remembered to take her head wrap. "You must be a widow then," the woman hissed. "That will explain why you are dressed like somebody's wife." The girl standing beside the woman snickered. She was unmarried, not much younger than Ifeyinwa herself. Her breasts were small and pointy, her pubic area covered with a string of loincloth, her body streaked with intricate woolly painting. Ifeyinwa liked her hairstyle. It was swept high and had hardened from years of being sectioned and layered with palm oil, charcoal, and clay dressing, the construction shaped like a perfect crest, curving all the way to her nape with the elegance of a ram's horn, and adorned with polished bone trinkets that gave her extra height, a sign that she was the daughter of wealthy parents. Ifeyinwa wondered how many moons remained before the girl would see her first blood, before she would go into the Igbo state, when she would be fed more than she could possibly consume, her body fattened to a great proportion and dyed with camwood, before she would come out in the full display of the approving public and the satisfaction of the men who liked their women heavy, rolls of fat jiggling every time she walked, every time she danced. The girl's mother glowered at her. "Why are you looking at my daughter like that?" she asked Ifeyinwa, tugging the girl closer, as though she was suddenly afraid that Ifeyinwa would harm them. Ifeyinwa hastened away. She took the routes behind the neighborhood farmlands, away from the village centers, away from scrutiny. Night would come before any spit or spat on the ground dried, when her new husband, Nnopudo, would return from his farmland, and so she must get herself to the church at Onitsha before he sent a search party after her, before the darkness and the evil that prowled in it fell on her. She hurtled down a gully-eaten road, tracking the path she had once seen her aunt Ujuako taking after the woman joined the missionaries at Onitsha and locked around the bushes every time she went to worship with them, so that their clans people would not find her out, so that they would not taunt or punish her for abandoning their culture for the white man's God. At the intersection linking her village with the next, she spotted a group of men walking toward her, their farm tools slung over their shoulders. They smiled. She walked past, kept her face down. Isn't that the wife of Unokudu? One of them said, and Ifeyinwa kept walking. She tried not to run. She did not turn to look at them or to acknowledge the person who had spoken, not even when the man said, Nne, Chelu, are you Unokudu's wife? Ifeyinwa quietly said, Mba, I don't know who that is, and continued walking, her heart pulsing in her throat, and she willed the men to keep going, to leave her alone. Sweat prickled the back of her neck under her breasts, but she did not pause to scratch or to catch her breath. She kept walking until she came to a junction, and it was only after she had turned at a corner that did she look back and saw that the men did not come after her. She sighed, felt the hot press of urine. She did not squat to pee. She would hold this pee. She would hold it inside her, even if it burned. She would hold it until she got to the church, until she had gotten herself to safety. She had just spotted the tall wooden cross sitting on the roof of the church when she saw a group of women coming out from a narrow track that led to the inland villages. They were all married, she could see, all of them wearing clothes wrapped around their waists, some of them with new hair, their hair newly shapen to indicate their age in wifehood. Some had already braided their hair in complicated styles, their ankles and arms adorned with fine jewelry, bare feet. She ran. There was no point pretending or holding the panic inside. These women will find her out. These women had the face of her mother, who could sniff out the truth from you with just a stare. Look at her, one of them said. What a shame. She is going to those missionaries, another said. What a disgrace. I would sell her into slavery if she were my child and use that money to buy a good wrapper, another said. Running with such heavy ornaments weighing down her legs made the action difficult. Walking with them was already an onerous task. One would have to swing their legs in a deliberate, pompous manner, throwing a limb out in a sweeping arc before the other so that the ankles would not collide and cause them to trip over themselves. The metals bounced and beat into her skin, making squeaky sounds. Urine spots from between her legs, hot and burning. It coursed down, caked the sound under her feet, but she kept running. The church rushed toward her. The earth was a strip of land rolling back as she pushed forward. Her chest was expanding and contracting, wild drums pounding in her ears, her eyes blurred with unshed tears. The church gate opened its mouth and she flung herself into its jaws. Her ankles crashed into each other and she was tumbling to the ground, her belly making acrobatic tumbles as though Obanje children had taken abode inside her. She would have landed flat on her face and crushed things if a boy, not a boy really, a young man who looked one or two peer groups older than her, caught her and held her up. Hey, he said in Igbo, in an Igbo that had been corrupted by the white man's tongue. Jilinwayo. He dropped his hands from her waist. She stepped back. Who do I go to? She asked him, swiped at her tears, and tried and failed to steady her voice. Who are you looking for? He asked. He was not much taller and had a face that had been washed clean of clay, a head that had been shaved of the typical fashionable styles, a body that was now clad in the same outfit the white men she once saw wore, simple white shirt tucked into pants that stopped at his ankles, his feet encased in sand-colored shoes. I want to see the people you work for, she told him, smiling, to get him to keep his gaze on her face so he would not notice that she had urinated on herself. He looked down and looked up quickly and returned a sad smile. You are in trouble, he said, and you need our help. Seeing that he had noticed her urine and that he could sense her predicament, she put away the appearances, smoothing her wrapper, which stopped just above her ankles. Yes, I need help, she said. You're welcome, he told her. I must take you to Miss Bennis. He led the way to the back of the church, where a row of thatched roofed buildings sat. He made a show of clicking his shoes hard on the ground, like a child showing off a prized thing. His hands dug into the pocket of his finely pressed pants. He walked past a group of young men like himself, all of them dressed in the same manner, sitting around and peeping into notebooks, scrawling scripts onto slate boards, chatting in foreign tongues. They stopped talking when they saw her and said something to the young man in English, their eyes going over her body, her breasts, the urine-stained wrapper. All her life, she had never paid attention to her nakedness. She had worn nothing as a child. Then her mother strapped her with cowrie-covered loincloth when her pubic area had begun to sprout hair. And finally, she got the wrapper from her husband. She had never cared about nudity, but now, with the men looking at her, all of them deliberately speaking in the missionary language, their eyes going over her breast like she was a meat on a slab, and she wanted to reach up and cover herself. Ignore them, the young man said, and she left her hands at her sides and raised her head higher. So I'll stop here for now. Thank you. So
that was incredible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I should introduce someone. I'm sorry I missed the.
It's okay.
The schedule.
Check your private chat, because I think Sarah will have sent it to you. If not, I will do that right now. I will copy it into your private, okay? Let's see, here we go. Yeah. You're going to be introducing Nina. And let me do this to you. Chat amongst yourselves, everybody.
I did send it already, just
okay.
Just a moment ago.
Oh, okay. I have to scroll all the way down.
Here you go. I'm doing it again.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I found it. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Nina Apasami is a writer originally from Pittsburgh, which I loved in 2016. In her writing, she attempts to braid elements of science fiction, fantasy, and realism while blurring the boundaries between poetry and fiction. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the amazing Nina Apasami, who I've missed so much.
Thank you, Uka. Your reading was so beautiful. Everyone's readings have been just absolutely mind-blowing. I'm going to start with a poem called H2O. The signature of water in our histories is the cutlet of wild's tongue in the soil of our cotton souls. We kneel to the command of vapors, acrid, sharply rancid against the morning's petrichor and lime-kissed pasture. Our winters squelch euphoric days, profaning Artemis's careful hand. It was so soft. Are we soft enough for water to bond, soul to soul, arm to branch, leaf to hand, agony to apathy? Are we kind enough to bathe in the wind that carries breath to breath, life to death, charm to hex, melody to elegy? Rivers' very wines consume our chortles until not a hush exists to ripple the candor of these olden waves. The next one is a poem called To All the Tales You Did Not Want, an ode. Have you ever seen an ocean sullied by an old date's spit? Or watched a man eat crystals from a tyrant's tongue? Or spied a saint basking blistered feet in a sea of sand? Have you ever heard a dragon giggle itself into an owl, or heated an empire smoldering into straw, or hearkened the timber of a mountain baking hell? Have you ever ached to cross a precipice of mythic iolite, or yearned for butterscotch waves locked by fibbing gold, or craved the doves you knew were stolen from Elysium? Did you not bother to question the eroded angel's simper, or query the foretold aperture that never hears song, or challenge the emptiness of the monarch's hand? A soul shielded is a mind trapped by a mirage sculpted, a lie against stories dreaded. But I fear more the lie that crumbles. The next thing I will read is the first part of a longer story, but I think it actually works on its own, so hopefully it won't be too much of a fragment. Crumbs of the Universe, Act 1, A Frantic Morsel. My throat felt like a saltine cracker, a mountain of saltines, all smashed together and placed in just the right spot to make me unsure whether to drink more water or run to the bathroom to puke. At least if I did puke, I'd have a legitimate reason to flee this calamity. I could fib, tell them all it was a nasty bug. Surely then everyone would insist I go home and curl up beneath my covers. None of them would want to risk contracting a stomach bug themselves on this most tectonic of evenings. Somehow, though, I knew there would be no such luck. I shivered, though I was anything but cold per the dampening state of my underarms and forehead. I chanced to look around the dressing room at the others getting ready, wondering if they were all internally cringing at my pervasive mustiness. I showered not 2 hours before, but over the course of the past 3 months, I had learned that no amount of soap or toxin-laced antiperspirant deodorant could cure the globs of sweat my body spawned, a warning, surely, of what could only be my impending doom. I knew this was a mistake. This was all a mistake. You ready? Forcing myself to smile, I turned towards Ronnie, who looked like a goddess in her gentian gown, her hair cascaded over her shoulders in charcoal rivulets. I bent my head in an awkward nod. Ronnie's eyes glittered as she patted my shoulder. Well, at least she doesn't seem to be repulsed by the tropics beneath my shirt, I thought. You're going to be amazing. You've been so amazing. I'm really proud of you, Anna. She grinned. Me too. Here, look. We all got you something. Evelyn's voice popped up. She still had one eyelid and cheek left to slather in makeup, but still, she went over to her bag and pulled out a package meticulously wrapped in vintage newspaper. Here, open it. She trotted over and pressed the package into my palm. My eyes prickled as I nudged the tape off the paper. Oh, come on, just rip it, Nova's voice called from the corner. I bit my lip, detesting the idea of ruining the paper, even if its next destination was the garbage anyways. But time was of the essence. Fighting a grimace, I sundered the delicate wrapping, uncovering an exquisite journal. I breathed in sharply, running my thumbs over the fine peridot binding. On the back, minuscule amber etchings informed me that the journal was custom made from recycled books, ones too damaged to be saved, but whose pages could have a new life I could choose with my pen. My pen. The book itself quivered in my hands as I opened it to the first page. A tear almost escaped my left eye as I read the notes of encouragement from my friends. My heart hammered so violently it felt like it would pulverize my ribs. Thank you so much, I whispered finally, hugging the notebook to my chest. There was a moment of silence, not a tense silence, but a tempered one, an invisible cocoon of perfectly warmed water. And then those bells chimed. 5 minutes, i.e. places. I hurriedly rewrapped the journal in the torn paper and nestled it in my bag. I was aware of my legs moving, of the change in air from the dressing room to the backstage area, of others shuffling around me as I made my way to my position. And yet it was all a blur. Ugh, why was I shaking so? I knew this all by heart, as if the play, this living, ever-evolving story of which I was a beating piece, a hopeful morsel in a winding trek, was part of me, echoing in my atoms as resolutely as my own spirit. Why did it feel like a cat had its fist around my throat? Why did it feel like locusts were infecting my chest, dusting my lungs, effervescing my mind? Like a deck of cards, every piece, every building block, every person supported one another to weave one great wordy canvas. One wrong breath, and everything, everyone, everything, all of our work, all of their faith in me would buckle into ash. They believed in me, Ronnie, Evelyn, Jermaine, Ad, hell, even Nova. And I believed in them. I paled at the thought of letting them all down. A quiet rippled through the old warehouse as the lights dimmed. A gust of wind caressed my cheeks licking me into a tenuous state of consciousness. My chest tightened, grains percolating my vision as I forced chunky air into my lungs. Then the curtains were rising. This was happening. The world shook and I nearly gagged on the desert in my mouth. Please, please, please. Let the floor open up and swallow me whole. Let aliens fly over the earth and replace me with an off-kilter duplicate. Let alarm sound in the distance to rouse me from this nightmare. This was not a nightmare. I closed my eyes and opened them to walk in the shoes of a soul composed of thousands of syllables and of hundreds of syllables and thousands of dreams. I spoke my first words as her, but still I rattled below the surface. I couldn't sink like usual into her mind. Instead, I was flouncing on thin ice. Crack. I truly don't know how to describe the tumult that comes from feeling your chest cave, your world split when everything is still and sound, your body safe and intact. I heard myself garble my lines. They were there resounding in my head, but when they slipped from my mouth, it was all petals, fragments, and shredded universes. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My pulse was in my tongue, my lunch frothed in my gut. So help me, God. My speech faltered, failing as a marred record would, my lips vibrating of their own accord. It wasn't until Nova growled that I was yanked back to a semblance of reality, to the faces all watching me, waiting for me, in clenched disquiet. Bile bristled in my esophagus as I swayed and then made the only sensible choice. I ran. I sprinted backstage, dodging befuddled faces darting towards the narrow corridor that ran along one side of the warehouse. I ignored the clamorous chatters and gritted exhales that erupted in my wake. I suppressed the tug of Ronnie's alto voice snipping at my heels. A chorus of run, run, run poked my cranium as I burst out a side door and dashed across the parking lot. For once, I didn't care about the copper-tipped sunset, the birds of prey that skirted the warehouse theater, or Nova's purple DeLorean. My sight was stapled instead to the woods at the other end of the lot. And I was almost there, mere feet from the first willows, when the world spasmed, sending me crashing into the asphalt. I keened as my right wrist fractured between my sternum and the ground. How can so much go wrong in just a few moments? I babbled woefully in my mind. The ground continued to shake and then smoke itched my nostrils. Alarmed, I turned my head to see olive flames tapping the sky from a few miles away. The flames grew, the building, cars, and asphalt protesting the ground's sudden fit. Vroom. The flames spit out a pulse that lit through the world. I could only watch in horror as reality distorted, vibrations crawling up my skin. Sparks hampered my sight while the energy lifted me, literally into a radiant chasm. The final two things I'll read are poems. They're really short, so I hope I'm not going on too long. Glitter nothing. I never want to speak. Hang on, spell check opened up for no reason. All right, here we go. Glitter nothing. I never want to speak, yet I rattle always, like the brook that freezes then snaps as wind awakens deadened minnows. It doesn't snow and I feel sick. A lonely outlet hits sparking crystal cracking, a fatal silence. The quiet guts the tundra where magic once prevailed. It rains and silvers and I close my eyes to dream. Life paints the clock with lies. It thinks it knows everything. I think I know its fictions. I know nothing. No, I know tales of fairies, fiction all like forever, but still I chase rain to mystery's haunt. The last one is another poem called A Pen, the Power I Choose. Quiet. We were silent, still as a winter's night. We were solemn, mannered like a morning raven. All the same, you sought to remake us, to abstract us, curate us, object us, defaming our peace, our sons, our ballads, denying us our human stand. But we are human and we are here, and no one should stand for this house, this commune, when you refuse to show the sword behind your back. I say then that this is my sword, my pen, my power, which I will wield so even the stars can hear this bleeding, candid story. And that's all.
That was great, Nina. Thank you so much. I'm really glad I got to read your thesis too. That was quite an honor. Great range, so beautiful work. You're going to have to pull yourself together to introduce Philip. It's in your chat. I just gave you the...
Oh, thank you. Okay, so I am introducing Philip Shackleton. Philip Shackleton is a writer and musician originally from Alaska who now lives in Oregon. His most recent publication was featured in Critique, a literary journal based in Anchorage. He is on track to receive his MFA in Writing and Publishing this September.
One quick thing though, Philip was saying he was having troubles with his internet, and we've found the VCFA that if we all turn off our own videos, it usually helps the person that's speaking. So feel free to turn off your video if you can. Thank you.
Okay, I seem to be okay with mine off. I haven't gotten that message since then. Okay, so I am not reading from my thesis. This is from a story that is originally written a few years ago that I've been revising lately. It's the first chapter, so I don't have to give you much setup. It's set in Orca, Alaska, which is a fictional town that I made up. It's on the banks of Prince William Sound. It's really a reimagination of Cordova. And it's set when the state believed that testing nuclear weapons was a good idea. The crisis of the story is, which the satire is based on based on a piece of actual history when Edward Teller, the nuclear scientist who was considered the father of the hydrogen bomb, proposed that the federal government build a man-made harbor in Cape Thompson and explode 5 atomic bombs in the construction project. This was called Project Harriet. This is what we know now as a nuclear explosion in the Arctic would be a humanitarian and environmental nightmare. But the AEC poured tens of $millions into studying it. This story proposes the idea that this actually happened, and it's really kind of pointless. It would have topped Senator Stevens' Bridge to Nowhere, because a harbor in Cape Thompson is actually frozen 9 months out of the year and over 300 miles from Brooks Range. It would be absolutely pointless. And last thing, the character of Angela is the main character, and her mother is actually a Russian immigrant. So I don't get into that till later in the story, but that should be important to mind. And this first chapter is about 7 pages, and that's what I'll read. And it's called Angela Confronts the Bomb. During the height of the Cold War, the paranoia had reached even the small coastal town of Orca, Alaska, just off the banks of Prince William Sound. In May 1960, Angela, a bright but mischievous 16-year-old, her best friend Erica, their mutual pest Billy, as well as 15 classmates were studying science at the local high school with Miss Murray, a 20-something teacher from Anchorage. Neither Angela nor Erica had much use for science. Erica whispered to Angela, "What do you want to do after school?" as Miss Murray messed about with some science gizmos on her desk. Erica was a tall, thin brunette with a serious appearance, a sharp chin, curly hair, and eyeglasses. She rarely smiled, which was a mask she wore, because she was the funniest person Angela had ever met. "Paint," Angela whispered back. Angela had the fire red hair, which ran in her mother's family for generations. She'd often been accused of coloring it in with crayons. "That's what we always do," Erica answered. "It's all there is." Would Angela and Erica like to pay attention? Angela was unsure how long her teacher had been listening. Over the next few weeks, we'll be talking about some exciting stuff. Time dilation, the twin paradox. Interrupting Miss Murray's lecture was a loud bell. Neither the fire alarm nor the school bell. "Okay, kids, we've talked about this drill." The whole class crawled under their desks, curled up in tight balls, while grabbing their ankles. Angela thought of kindergarten and nap time. Some kids whispered to themselves. Miss Murray had gotten under her desk. After a few moments, a second bell, similar to the first, sounded, and everyone got out from under their desks. They awaited Miss Murray to retake her position. Does anybody know what that bell was for? Miss Murray was again in front of her class. Billy's hand shot up, while Erica leaned over and whispered to Angela, "This could be fun." Angela smiled. "It's for nuclear defense, to protect us from a nuclear attack," Billy said in a tone you might use for a book report. Angela and Erica started to laugh. The whole class turned and looked. Eyebrows were raised. With a flush in his face, Billy gathered a most serious tone. "What are you nincompoops laughing at? Do you think nuclear war is funny?" "Yep, hilarious," Angela said. "But we die." "Want to know the most hilarious thing?" Angela asked. "What?" He'd raised both arms. "In a nuclear attack, we're all going to die, and that stupid drill won't do anything." Angela pretended to stab herself in her heart. Billy did not appear impressed. "The reason for the drill is our parents and other adults want us to die curled up in little balls. It makes them feel swell." Angela glanced outside. The sun had come out and shone its light. It took a moment for Billy to regain his confidence. "You don't know anything." "I do." Angela wanted to stomp her feet for effect, but being seated, she questioned the effectiveness. She clicked her tongue twice against the roof of her mouth. Instead, Mother filled us in. "Not only does Mother know many things, she tells the truth and believes we should understand the world we're going up in, the spooky world. The Soviet bombs alone can kill 22 billion people. What is this? What is with the Soviet ambition?" Angela looked to her teacher. "I know they've done some incredible things, but where are they going to find 22 billion people to kill? Miss Murray, have the Soviets found a way to kill us all multiple times over?" The teacher shook her head while Billy's features sank lower. "She's full of bullshit. Language, Billy. She's making this up to scare me. She's always done things like this. When we were 5, she told me Santa Claus was a Soviet spy used by the Reds to gain information on the next generation of Americans. I believed her. She told me he put listening devices in all our presents. I tore up all my presents that year looking for those devices. My parents caught me and I had to go to a therapist. She's up to something again." Miss Murray paused and took a breath. "I'm sorry, but I've never known Angela's mother to be wrong about much in this area." Angela raised her hand, while Billy looked frightened. He leaned over his desk with his hands covering his face. "Yes, Angela?" "I'd like some ice cream." Billy lifted his head up. "Ice cream? You're thinking about ice cream?" "I always think about ice cream." She turned to Miss Murray. "You said it was part of your teaching method to reward students when they got something right. I was right. Now I want some ice cream. Erica would like some too. She helped. We'd like bacon and broccoli ice cream with chocolate sauce on top." Be serious for a moment. Bacon and broccoli? Miss Murray was puzzled. "Yes, the bacon is a strong force. It collides with the second subatomic particle, the broccoli. You pour chocolate sauce on top to create nuclear taste bud fission." Angela paused and held her index finger in front of her chin. These were the time of deep, deep thoughts. "We'd like some now." Miss Murray laughed. "Very good, Angela. I can always count on you to make a joke of my lessons." Angela didn't back down. "I'm serious. I'm always serious about ice cream." "No need to yell. What I meant was..." Angela calmed herself. "It's like you don't even know me. I don't yell. You listen too loudly." Erica broke in. "People always do that around her. You wouldn't believe how many. You'd be surprised what I believe. What I meant to say is, we need to take ourselves seriously. Billy seems upset." Miss Murray said. Billy raised his hand in a split second after being acknowledged. "I am very upset, Miss Murray. Can we try and bring this conversation to a close? Martha has been out sick the entire week," Miss Murray referred to the school's counselor. "Then can we have some ice cream?" Angela asked. "We'll see." Miss Murray turned to Billy. "Do you have any questions?" He sat straight up. "Yes, I have a question. If there's no defense against nukes, why do we have them?" Erica's hand shot up. She started to talk before being called. "The defense against the Soviets attacking us with nukes is to have more nukes than them. If they can kill us 4 times, but we can only kill them 5, they won't nuke us." She turned to Angela. "What did your mother call that?" Mutual. She looked to Miss Murray for help, but then blurted out, "Mutual assured ice cream." Miss Murray shook her head. "Assured destruction. This conversation is getting out of hand. I know you girls are bright and handle difficult issues, but I'm surprised your mother would go into such depths on this one. Mother is a woman of great depths. She believes in those depths. We all do." During this interaction, Billy had been staring intently at Angela. She believed he thought of something bright to say. "You make nukes sound like suicide weapons." "Yep. So if there is an attack, there's nothing we can do? We're all dead?" Angela paused for a moment and took a breath. "Yep. All dead. It sounds like a poem from the Bible." "There's nothing we can do?" Billy repeated. Angela had a joyful smirk on her face while Miss Murray glared at her. Erica leaned over and whispered, "We better cool it. I think she's trying to blow us up with her mind. And you never know, she is from Anchorage." Miss Murray returned her attention to the whole class. "Does anyone know what a nuclear free zone is?" Angela's hand hit the air. Miss Murray looked at the rest of the class, seemed disappointed. Angela was the only one willing to answer, but finally called upon her. "It's where nuclear weapons are given away free with ice cream. Can't you see I'm craving?" "I could see you're something, Angela, but you're not right. A nuclear free zone is a region where nuclear technology is strictly prohibited. Nobody can bring it in for any reason. There's currently only one country in the world who is a nuclear free zone. Does anyone know that country?" "New Zealand," Erica quietly repeated. "Very good." Angela turned to her. "Where'd you run across that info?" "I read it in a magazine last time I went to the dentist." "That's right. Erica is addicted to reading, Miss Murray. You should see when we go out for lunch. She has to read the entire menu, even the wine list. Though she has read it all before, and we go to the same place every day, and she orders fish and chips each time. Somebody will have hell. Language, Angela. I'm not going to warn you again." "Okay, sorry. Somebody will have heck to play if anyone takes away Erica's books, magazines. If she goes even a couple of days without them, she can't sleep, she gets moody, she can't move her bowels right." "Can't move my bowels right?" "I had to make it sound realistic," Angela whispered to Erica. Miss Murray, who looked like she'd aged about a year in the past half hour, slowly said, "We've taken another wrong turn." "I do aim to give satisfaction," Angela said. "We know you do." She turned her attention away from Angela. "Erica?" "Yes. Do you know anything else about New Zealand's policies?" Erica appeared bored. Angela hoped she'd recite the entire article for funniest sake. She knew her friend possessed an excellent memory. "They take it seriously to the point they wouldn't allow one of our nuclear submarines into their waters. We responded with a brilliant piece of international diplomacy. We called their government a bunch of silly nincompoops." Miss Murray asked further, "Did they really say silly nincompoop?" "No, I translated the exchange into the lingo of the elementary school playground. Some things are better understood that way." "So there is hope." "What do you mean?" Billy turned to Miss Murray. "People tend to catch good ideas like they catch the flu. The same could be true for the countries. If one country has a good idea, other countries will see it working and try to catch that idea for themselves. This goes on for years until everyone has the same good idea. No nukes. What is needed is for everyone to follow New Zealand's example." "Let me talk to them," Angela said. "How will that help? You know me, Billy. My mouth is always running. They will agree just to shut me up." "You could have a point." The bell rung. The class gathered up their books and prepared to leave. "Remember, we have a test on Friday," Miss Murray reminded her students. The students exited the classroom and made their way to their next. Okay, and that is the end. And I'm introducing Molly. That's the end of chapter 1.
Thank you so much, Philip. That was great. It was great dialogue, by the way. Keeps it flowing really well. Thank you.
Well, I have it right here. I printed it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Molly Martin is a Minnesota-born and raised author and editor. Her work appears in literary journals and in several anthologies, and in her novel, Survivors Club. Between Minnesota and Vermont, Molly was an exchange student in Paraguay, joined the Army, got deployed in Afghanistan and to Iraq, got a BA in linguistics from the University of Oregon, and developed a love of tea.
All right. Thank you, Philip. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. Okay, I'm going to be reading from a short piece that originally kind of got started a little bit in Micaiah's class and a little bit in Aaron's class. So that's whose fault this is. Summer. Summer is a teacup time. Perfect pretty petals and wiggly bee butts. At night, heat lightning dances across the sky. In summer, she puts on a wild display in the cumulonimbi that mound dollop upon dollop like whipped cream adrift in a blue cocoa of the sky. Thunder grumbles and rumbles his displeasure, but he's as impotent as any man, so lightning ignores him and skips across the night. Summer is rafting, floating, lazy, bellyful time. Strawberries the size of a thumb demur beneath their triad of leaves, while the bigger, bolder ones flaunt their red flesh out in the open. There are almost always bird-pecked and worm-nibbled, but so juicy sweet a mouthful is like drinking from a spring. Summer is careless animals, heat dazzled and sluggish, gone lax now they think the world is all theirs again. A snap of the slingshot almost always ends that notion before they even know what's coming for them. If not the sling's pellet, then a quick twist of the neck, and they hang limp, fur still sun-warm in her hand. She takes the life and brings the dead thing to the dead place. No trees here, no bushes, a parking lot, her sister has told her. No straight lines in nature. Biscayne said it, and it was a true thing, which is how Jing came to understand that the shapes around the dead place were not of nature, even though they breathed out deep sighs from time to time. Biscayne had told her to give it no place in her mind. It's a thing from before, and those fall into 3, and only 3 categories. And we all know what this one is, don't we? And she squinted her good eye at Jing. Jing nodded. Leave her right. As in? Biscay turned to sniff the wind, her short dark hair shining blue-black under the zenith sun's glare. Her copper-brown skin was filmed with sweat, and she smelled damp and musky ripe. As in leave her right there, Jing quoted. She slipped the carry sack from her shoulder and plucked out the slingshot as she set it down. A hunting? She asked. Don't forget, Biscayne reached into her cool pack and handed Jing a fur-wrapped glass vial. She was old enough to help gather samples. She nodded, and with that Biscayne set her off to stalk the shadow-dappled forest and prowl the baking grasslands. Later, as she squats in the parking lot, to gut the ground squirrel, she tries to give the building no mind, but it glares at her. The vines and creepers have tried to pull it down, but it remains, all square-shouldered and incongruent with the world. She can mark the spread of its fetid air like a high tide line, because beyond the edge of the parking lot has sprouted a fluff of sneaking moss and sassy weeds. Jing unrolls the fur, her fingers slipping over the vial's smoothness. She takes samples from the breeding parts of the ground squirrel, slides them in, and stoppers the vial. After she cleans the ground squirrel, she tosses the innards at the building, at the yawning door mouth with its snaggle of broken glass teeth. Everything has to feed. Autumn. Leaves don't fall. They float, glide, whirl, flash, swoop, dive, tumble, scuttle, flutter, flitter, roll, bounce, and eventually, either water or gravity forces them still where they rot, enriching the soil from which their mother tree draws sustenance. Autumn isn't the end. It's rest after so much life. It's an orderly surrender to stillness and an acknowledgement that unchecked, rampant, rapacious growth is not natural, normal, or necessary. Autumn reminds the living to slow down and be kind to themselves, because if they hope to have energy for spring, they need their rest. Autumn is also the time of smoke. As the trees shed their modesty and strut about in their barky nakedness, Biscayne climbs a rocky slope and shades her eyes with her palm. Jing bear walks up to join her. Biscayne frowns into the gloaming. It's best to look for fires at night, but to find smoke, daylight is required. Anything yet? Jing keeps 2 hissing cougars in her mind. One is terrified of a mooting and hopes no smoke will be found this year. The other longs for other human faces and hopes that their search will soon yield results. Maybe, Biscayne hooks a finger under Jing's chin and points her face south and east against the coming dark. Could be a low star, one of her mind cats growls, but she has to admit the flouncy cat licking her whiskers in satisfaction is correct. It's a fire. Not a forest fire or a prairie fire either, a domesticated fire that waits patiently for humans to feed it. Yeah? Biscayne asks, but the corners of her mouth are already drawn down in her I'm not happy and never smile smile. She knows that's what's there as well as Jing, better because she's older. Jing is all long limbs and big hands and feet, swims like a McAnswer. But Biscayne has soft places like lichen grown over her hips and chest. She is wide and fierce, where Jing is narrow and timid, an osprey to her sister's merganser. It's a long trail, Jing says. What else is on your calendar? Biscayne half shrugs. She finger combs the bloom of her hair until it's a proud mane and sets off towards the fire. Jing tries one more time because she's cautious as a turtle in a raccoon's mitts. Might be a Zardos wasteland. They glow. And if it's that, what category would that make it, sister mine? Biscayne sets a fast pace that says, more walking, less talking, loud and proud. Her pack is filled with vials. Her pack is filled with vials and is a heavy thing. Jing doesn't envy her the duty of it. Jackby, as in, Jackby nipple and get out quick. Winter. Winter is cold that licks into the bones and sucks out the marrow. It falls first in flurries and then in fat flakes and then in blizzards, stinging sharp and howling full of folk who've passed on, the unlucky and the aged. The song of winter is creaks and groans, the clattering of tree branches, and all the many-footed ways that a crust of snow can be trodden on. Winter has given up most colors and swathes herself in gray ash, white snow, brown mud, and blue sky. She adorns her face with icicles, whimsical for all they are sharp and piercing things. For warmth, winter pulls down the clouds, but they refuse to mate her and move on, leaving her as barren as ever. On the blue sky days, the sun blinds and the snow glitters to welcome the deepest chill. Winter is cobweb women with faces as seamed as the skin of ice when struck with a round stone. Their cobweb hair floats around their heads as if they had clouds of their own. Some have marks on their faces and bodies, tattoos and scars, piercings and reminders, mistakes survived and triumphs remembered. A body is a map of a life, and these women are far traveled. The third kind of before place is a bunker. The bunker that Jing and Biscayne winter in is one of 6 that spoke out from a parking lot, like splayed fingers on a pressed down hand. Each bunker is long and low and covered in grass. Open the old door and descend the stairs hard as any rock, but squared off except in the middle where feet have worn them down. At the bottom, the long room is burrowed so deep into the earth, it's hard to see the vault of the ceiling with its dark beams like ribs against the gray white of its concrete. Jing followed Biscayne, who knew many folks from past moots. After the hugs and touches, after breathing in the scents of so many different humans, Jing followed Biscayne to the lab where she could finally shed her cool pack and turn the vials over to a reedy young woman called Sujata. Her hair was long and so thick it needed both hands to lift it. Jing worried that if Sujata looked up too quickly, the weight of her hair might snap her slender neck. Maybe Biscayne worried about the same thing, for she ran her hands over Sujata's neck and pressed her palms against her collarbones. That night, Jing curled up alone to sleep, missing Biscayne's warm back against hers as she listened to the murmur of sleep-soft voices and the sighs and moans of lovers getting acquainted and reacquainted with each other. At breakfast, Biscayne and Sujata were a tangle of arms, leaning against each other while they eat. Sujata offers to introduce Jing to the man, and despite her turtle nature, she agrees, if only to see if her sister can extricate herself from Sujata's embrace. Ayman lives in a separate place, a little cave dug beneath the bunker. He reminds Jing of a bear with his large hands, his deep voice, and the hair that covers his cheeks, chest, chin, arms, and belly. He smells earthy and oaky and a bit sharp, and this too reminds Jing of a bear. I can see Biscayne in you, he says. Are you going to help collect specimens too when you're old enough? Jing frowns and folds her arms across her chest. I already help her. I know how to find the male and female breeding parts and how to pack them. We brought back 15 specimens. A mighty number, Ayman agrees. Even his laugh is a bear's. He shows Jing what is done with the specimens. They spend many hours slicing things leaf width thick and fixing them in small pans filled with twice rendered tallow. The specimens have to be rewrapped and repacked, ready for the next leg of their journey in the spring. This year, there are no new babies. There haven't been for nearly a decade, but Sujata and Ayman remind the gatherers that it is only a matter of time. The land will heal. Already some of the creatures have started to reproduce, and most of their young are viable, if not deformation-free. For now, Jing and the other youngsters play games, sing songs, and generally try to ignore the antics of their elders who are constantly sneaking away to kiss and cuddle. Winter is time to grow fat and flushed and filled with the pleasure of closeness. It is a time for long sleeps and stories of the past told around a bed of embers. It is a time to dream of what the future may hold and to hope. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
That was great. Thank you, Molly. That was really good. Really good to listen to.
Thank you. Let me pull up. I have the pleasure of introducing Amara next. Amara Okolo is the author of Black Sparkle Romance, Son of Man, and Daughter of Salt. She is an honorary fellow at the International Writing Program from the University of Iowa and the City Asylum Residency in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her writing has appeared on Catapult, Panorama Journal of Intelligent Travel, Commonwealth Writers, Hunger Mountain Magazine, and We Transfer. References to her work has been made on The Guardian, Al Jazeera, Radio France International. She is the 2019 Emerging Writer Scholar at the MFA program in Writing and Publishing at VCFA. She currently lives in Vermont, where she is working on her first and second novels. Please join me in welcoming Amara.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to read a very short paragraph from a short story that I wrote last year. It's called The Art of Planting Flowers. His mother had taught him the art of planting flowers. She had taught him how to love the soil like it was human, burrowing into it until the blackness of the mud stained his fingers and filled his nails. It was from her he learned how to lower flower beds into the dugout holes of death. From her he learned the angle his hands had to bend as he pruned each flower. He had only been a year old when she introduced him to the garden, a forest of colors, humming with birds, with bees and butterflies, clumps of blood-red roses extending from stems of thorns, a carnation of hydrangeas, coils of clematis, an unfolding family of hibiscuses, and drooping stems of lilies. She held him on her waist, a robin chirping over their heads, the rose of Sharon clutched in his chubby hands, making him sneeze. The sun was warm, the air was edible. He raised the perfumery petals to his mouth as his mother sang an ancient Igbo song. I will touch the skin of the earth, Nda. I will smell her soil, Nda. Let me decay, let me be reborn again, Nda. For she is my mother, my land, Anyoma, Nda, Ndalioma, Nda. 2 years later, his mother would walk into the garden on a cool September evening with a kitchen knife in her hand and slit her throat. He would be a witness, a 5-year-old sitting on the windowsill of his room, playing chutes and ladders, his eyes straying occasionally from the game to the garden, the rustling of leaves and bobbing of daffodils in the breeze. His newborn sister had arrived 3 days earlier, and she was in the next room, asleep in the cot. The room smelled of lunch, the pleasant aroma of boiled plantains and crayfish stew. He had worn around, and the rustling brought his head up again to see his mother standing in the garden. She looked towards the house, her eyes glassy with tears. Perhaps she had seen him, perhaps she had not, could not tell. The sun was setting behind her, a butter yellow halo, like the circles drawn around the head of the white Jesus in his Bible picture books. The stainless steel of the knife stole the sunlight as she raised it to her throat and drew a line. He never heard her body fall. The flowers had been too bountiful. They cradled her like a thoughtful lover as she bled her life onto them, drenching the soul she had loved with the reminders of her years. It was only on the day of the funeral that they found the note his mother had written, buried in the jar of powdered cane sugar in the kitchen. 3 months of crying, of confusion and questions that shrouded the family, and it was answered in a sheet of neatly folded paper weakened with a frailness of time gone. The familiar cursive of his mother's handwriting was scrawled in black ink that had stained through the paper, and as his father read along, his sobbing punctuated his sentences, his voice rocking the room. My head is begging me to split it open. I will answer these voices speaking to me, or else I will run mad. Please love my children, my son Ekeledo. Tell my Papando I will see her in the morning. In another world, I will be her mother again, but not in this one. This world, it hates me. Let me go to my flowers. I need to sleep. One morning, when he was 7, his father came downstairs as they ate breakfast. He kissed him and Papando on their mouths. It was a Sunday morning, the week before their mother's memorial, and Auntie Bisa, their father's elder sister, was present, ironing the matching fabrics the family would wear to church the next Sunday. His father went over to her, hugged her tightly, his head buried in the curve of her shoulder blade. Ekelodo watched them, his eyes dry. The room smelled of the steaming iron and soggy Nasco cornflakes infused with warm milk. When his father extracted himself from the hug, he picked up his car keys from the top of the fridge beside the kitchen door and went through it, the screen door thudding closed with a sharp slam. They found his body in the river a week later. His seatbelt was still intact, clipped across his chest. The windows had been wound up. Some say he had intentionally run off the bridge. Others said he must have fallen asleep at the wheel. But whatever it was, his father was dead. Ikeledo knew this much. His mother had slit her throat in front of him. His father had chosen the waters, burying himself in its belly until she was full and spat him out. But that Sunday morning, as the priest gave a sermon that juxtaposed his father's death with his mother's memorial, Ikeledo felt the weight of the congregation's eyes on his back. Their eyes burrowed into his skin until he became porous, grief oozing from the holes. Though he was a child, he began to understand that the world he would work through will be shrouded by the horrors of his parents' suicides. They would haunt his dreams. He would live in the shadow of their deaths instead of their lives. His eyes strayed down to the lilies in his hands. They were limp, speckled with the morning's dew, and as clear as the day outside the heat of the church. He knew what he would become. Thank you.
Thank you. That was incredible. I'm glad we got to add you in tonight. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Amara, you're going to introduce Sarah Leamy next. I just sent you in the private chat Sarah's bio.
Sarah is a writer, poet, and editor. Her latest book, Hidden, a fictionalized genderqueer narrative prose poem, was published by Finishing Line Press in April. Please welcome Sarah Leamy.
Thank you. I'm double tagging today since I was in the programs and now I'm working with Rita, so I get to do a bit of both. I figured I'd claim tonight as well. And for Erin, I pulled out my VCFA jacket that we met in 2 years ago, and I still have this that we had from that AWP in Portland, Oregon. So that was for you, Erin. So I'm just going to read 3 very short poems. All of my poems are less than a page generally. So I'm going to read 3 short poems just as a little thank you. The MFA program really did change my life and open me up as a writer and just open up my world. So thank you. So the first one is called I'm Addicted. I'm addicted, she said, reading whatever she could get her hands on, books or bodies, with an overhead fan cool across my lips, sticky skin, thighs across knee, shades dropped. Grandfather clock silent, a dog licked her paw, the clunk of a cat flap. A solitary motorcycle passed slowly by as the afternoon dripped across heavy hips. She saw only what's on the page. And this is basically it's a story in the form of a poem. So it goes from the meeting through the short affair and then the ending. So nothing ever really lasts long with me. So this next poem is called White Lies and Alcohol. Pacifier in mouth, another beer that is, imaginary safety hard hat on, and in my own protection zone with the dog nearby. My box is still packed, I was ready, and there she was, finally, Clara, my lover, former lover, I suppose. And I put down the bottle and shed the cowboy hat, and it made me sad. But Clara said what she'd come to say, and I hated all the pushing and the demanding. And yes, she was just pushing me to listen, because we both knew it's not really that we have to talk, is it? No, she wanted to talk, and she wanted me to say sorry for something, probably for being me and not for being Henry, the one before me, the one after me, the one she dreams about when alone or with me in the bed next to her. It didn't matter which. And so I petted the dog and nodded along with the white lies and alcohol. And then we're gonna jump back in their relationship to another little date story. This one's called Last Chance at Being Publicly Awkward. The conversation didn't go as expected. Avoiding the topic of us, of Henry or the kid, or her friends who no longer like me, and all that messy stuff of a small town affair. We were talking about fashion and who gets to wear what. She picked up a glossy magazine as we'd waited for our table reservation, and nervously she checked out the room to see who she knew, and more importantly, who knew her. Well, that's what I imagined she did when she glanced past me and then back with a sheepish grin. Once at our corner table, Clara folded her hands carefully over her lap, sensible keens tapping on the floor. I tried to connect with her, keep us chatting, and so I threw out a few more questions about what she buys and why. But then she asked me what was I thinking about. No, truly. And even though she meant us, I couldn't go there, not now, not in her fancy local restaurant where everybody watched and judged and listened with eyes averted and conversations hushed. And so I told her. In my 20s, tidy whities were the undies of my choice. Family friendly, you could buy them anywhere. Sexy too in the right context. In my 30s, I'd hang out in the backyard in boxers, striped boxers against a flat tanned stomach and little else, perhaps a cowboy hat and boots if it were rattler season. Then came the sensible hip huggers of my 40s, cotton only, faded colors, flip-flops, softer stomach, more sitting and less striding. At 50 though, what's next? She knocked back her whiskey, stood up, grabbed her things and said, depends. And that's it. Thank you.
I'm so glad you read, Sarah. Thank you for sharing those. We are finished with our lineup of readers for the night, but I think it might be nice to just have a little moment where anybody can unmute and, you know, share your praise, your thoughts, your applause. This has been quite an evening, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a range. I mean, just a beautiful range of voices and settings and countries and emotions. And yeah, thank you for letting me join in. And
Sarah, definitely one of us. Thank you all for making me cry out of just like joy and pride and gratitude. That's all I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you all for the memories. I keep telling my students about Vermont, Montpelier. They're so sick of me. I talk about it all the time. One of them asked me, why don't you move back to Vermont? You keep talking about it all the time. So, yeah. So thank you all for the memories and for teaching me, for making me who I am today. I don't think I would have been who I am today if I hadn't gone to the program, if I hadn't lived in Vermont for 2 years. So I'm much more confident than I used to be. So I owe that to you all. Thank you.
Agreed, absolutely agreed. And Micaiah, thanks for taking me on too. Well, this was years ago. Appreciate it.
Yeah, congratulations to everyone who's graduating. I'm just so thrilled and proud of you all. And oh my God, it's so nice to see your faces. And yeah, I second you, Uka. I absolutely feel like my life was completely changed for the better by Vermont and by VCFA and you all. So sending you all so much love, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. If everyone wants to unmute, let's do a round of applause. I think that would be lovely. Congratulations to all of our graduates. Congratulations to our alums and our first-year students. You guys are remarkable.